I knew moving into this neighborhood would come with rules, but I never imagined they'd try to control my life. It started small. A warning about my mailbox color, a note about my trash bins being an inch too far from the curb. Harmless, until the fines started showing up. Then the threats. Then the cameras pointed straight at my house. I thought the HOA was just strict, but what they did next turned my home into a nightmare I couldn't escape. Because when power falls into the wrong hands, even paradise can turn into prison. Would you have fought back or packed up and left? For the first few months after moving in, life in Willow Creek felt almost too perfect. Rows of freshly painted houses lined the curved streets like something out of a brochure. Every lawn was trimmed to the same height, every mailbox matched, and every morning smelled faintly of coffee and sprinkler mist. It was quiet, predictable, and safe, the kind of neighborhood where everyone waved, even if they didn't mean it. Ethan and his wife, Mia, had bought their home here to start over. After years of apartment living and noisy neighbors, the peace of a planned community seemed like a dream. Mia had just found out she was expecting their first child, and Ethan was working long hours to make sure everything was ready for the baby. On weekends, they'd sit on the porch, sipping iced tea, watching kids ride their bikes down the cold sack. It felt like the kind of life they'd worked for, calm, stable, and finally theirs. But in Willow Creek, calm was only allowed on certain terms. The HOA, officially called the Willow Creek Preservation Committee, prided itself on keeping the neighborhood beautiful. They sent out monthly newsletters reminding residents about approved flower colors, trash can schedules, and the importance of visual harmony. It sounded harmless, even neighborly, until you realized the committee's rules seemed to change depending on who you were, and at the center of it all was Mrs. Dalton, the HOA president, self-appointed guardian of the neighborhood standards. She was the kind of woman who'd spot a misplaced garden gnome from 3 houses away, always in pastel blouses, clipboard in hand, and an unsettling smile that never quite reached her eyes. Ethan didn't think much of her at first. He figured she was just proud of her community. But Mia noticed things he didn't, the way Mrs. Dalton would linger near their driveway a few minutes too long, scribbling something in her notepad, the way she'd frown at their porch plans, or comment on how some homeowners take liberties with color coordination. It started small, like most problems do, a note tucked into their mailbox about improper lawn edging. Then another one, warning them that their trash bins had been visible past 9 a.m. Ethan laughed it off, assuming it was just a mix-up. After all, every new homeowner gets a few warnings, right? But the notes kept coming, every week, a new violation. Their fence paint was slightly off-tone. Their front door wreath was non-compliant. Even their welcome mat was unapproved material. Mia began to dread checking the mail. Ethan tried to stay calm, promising he'd handle it. But deep down, he felt a slow burn of frustration. They were paying hundreds of dollars a month to live here, and somehow it felt less like home and more like surveillance. Neighbors started acting differently too. Some stopped waving. Others avoided eye contact altogether. A few whispered when Ethan mowed his lawn, pretending not to look when he turned around. Something invisible had shifted, an unspoken warning that they'd somehow broken a rule that wasn't written down. Still, Ethan believed he could smooth things over. He attended the next HOA meeting, hoping to clear the air, explain the misunderstandings, maybe even make peace. But the moment he walked into that small, fluorescent-lit community hall, he realized he was outnumbered. Rows of homeowners sat stiffly, papers in hand, whispering. Mrs. Dalton stood at the front, arms folded, eyes locked on him. What was supposed to be a friendly discussion turned into a trial. Every minor infraction was listed like a rap sheet. The unapproved paint shade, the slightly crooked mailbox, even a garden ornament that disrupted uniformity. Ethan barely got a word in before the fines were announced. That night, Mia cried quietly on the couch, while Ethan stared out the window at the dark street, the same street that once felt so peaceful. For the first time, he noticed the security lights flickering from house to house, each porch camera blinking like a silent witness. Somewhere along the way, Willow Creek had stopped feeling like a neighborhood and started feeling like a trap, and Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. For a few days after that disastrous HOA meeting, things went quiet. Too quiet. Ethan told himself it was over, that maybe Mrs. Dalton had gotten what she wanted, a little display of authority, and would finally move on. He even tried convincing Mia to focus on happier things. The nursery paint, baby names, the ultrasound coming up next week. But beneath the calm surface of Willow Creek, something ugly had started to take root. The next violation letter came on a Tuesday morning. Mia found it taped directly to the front door. The tape tearing a bit of the fresh paint as she peeled it off. Notice of non-compliance. Unauthorized exterior decoration. It took her a few minutes to realize what they meant. The small wind chime hanging from the porch, a gift from her mother, had apparently violated visual noise regulations. Ethan crumpled the notice in his fist and tossed it into the trash. "Enough is enough," he muttered. "This is harassment." But that was just the beginning. Over the next 2 weeks, the violations became relentless, one after another, sometimes 2 in the same day. Their grass was uneven by HOA standards. Their driveway had oil stains visible from the street. Even the small solar lights along their walkway were flagged as unauthorized modifications. It was almost impressive how creative the HOA had become in finding reasons to fine them. Then came the fines themselves. Envelopes stamped in bold red ink. Payment DUE $250. Final warning, $500. Each one signed with Mrs. Dalton's tidy, looping handwriting. At first, Ethan tried to reason with her. He emailed the HOA office explaining that most of these violations weren't even listed in the official bylaws. He quoted sections, attached photos, even offered to repaint or replace anything that didn't meet the supposed standards. No reply. Days later, a single email came back. All concerns are under review. Continued non-compliance will result in property penalties. No name, no signature, just the seal. That's when Ethan started noticing the cars. A white sedan parked across the street at odd hours, sometimes with the engine running. A silver SUV that slowed each time it passed their house. Once when he walked out to get the mail, he swore he saw a phone camera tilt down quickly inside one of the vehicles. At first, he thought he was being paranoid. But then Mia showed him something that erased all doubt. Late one night, while scrolling through the neighborhood Facebook group, she found a post from someone named Concerned Neighbor 87. It had a photo, their house, with the caption, "Some people think rules don't apply to them. How long before their improvements lower our property value?" The photo was recent. Too recent. You could see the porch light still glowing from that very evening. Mia's hands trembled as she scrolled through the comments. Dozens of neighbors chimed in, some defending them, others piling on. Words like eyesore, disrespectful, and non-compliant popped up again and again. Ethan felt the blood drain from his face. "They're turning the neighborhood against us," he whispered. And they were. The following week, they woke to find someone had dumped a bag of dead leaves and dirt on their porch. Their mailbox flag was snapped clean off. The trash cans were knocked over, not by wind, but deliberately. When Ethan checked the porch camera footage, his stomach twisted. There in the grainy black and white video was a figure, hooded, but unmistakable. Mrs. Dalton's hunched posture, clipboard in hand. She glanced toward the camera for half a second before the image cut out. The power had flickered at that exact moment. It wasn't just enforcement anymore. It was intimidation. Mia wanted to call the police, but Ethan hesitated. "If we go to the cops, she just spin it as a misunderstanding. We need proof, undeniable proof." So he started collecting it. Every letter, every photo, every noise complaint. All of it went into a folder labeled evidence. He installed new security cameras, this time with backup storage. He even recorded audio from their next HOA meeting, but Mrs. Dalton seemed to stay one step ahead. When Ethan arrived home one afternoon, He found two men in reflective vests measuring his fence with tape. Routine inspection, one of them said, avoiding eye contact. That night, another notice arrived, unauthorized fence extension. Immediate correction required. Ethan's fence hadn't been altered in months. The next day, a lien notice arrived in the mail, a legal threat that the HOA could seize their property for outstanding dues. That's when Ethan realized this wasn't about rules anymore. It was about power. Nia stopped sitting on the porch. She kept the blinds closed most days. Her once bright laughter turned into quiet sighs. Even their friends stopped visiting, afraid of getting involved. It was like living in a ghost neighborhood, perfect lawns. The baby shower day finally arrived, and it was perfect. Or at least it started that way. Our backyard was filled with laughter, music, and the smell of grilled chicken drifting through the air. My wife looked radiant, glowing like the sun itself as our friends and neighbors gathered around her, showering her with gifts and love. Even old Mr. Henderson, who never leaves his porch, showed up with a big pink teddy bear. Everyone came. Everyone except Mrs. Dalton. At first, I thought maybe she finally decided to be mature and stay home. But knowing her, I should have known better. The party was going smooth until there was a knock at the door. I figured it was another guest or delivery. But when I opened the door, there she was, Mrs. Dalton herself, standing there with her arms crossed like a mole cop who's had too much caffeine. Mrs. Dalton, I asked, trying to keep it civil. You came after all? Her eyes narrowed. Don't flatter yourself, she hissed. I'm here because there have been multiple noise complaints from your party. I blinked. Noise complaints? Mrs. Dalton? Half the people at this party are your homeowners. Who exactly is complaining? Your dog? That one got a few laughs from inside. Her face twisted into pure rage. You could almost see the steam rising off her head. She started stammering something about HOA regulations and decibel limits. I told her if she wanted to measure something, she could grab a slice of cake and measure how much joy she was missing out on. She stepped closer, wagging a finger at me. If I hear one more sound coming from this property, she said, I won't be very nice. I grinned. Mrs. Dalton, you're not nice now. The whole crowd burst into laughter. Her face went red as a fire hydrant. She stood there frozen for a second, then stormed off like an angry pigeon who lost a bread fight. Everyone cheered, but deep down, I had a bad feeling that wasn't the last of her. 2 days later, the very day my wife and I were discharged from the hospital, Mrs. Dalton filed charges against me. Assault, battery, endangerment, everything she could possibly list. The audacity was almost impressive. She even showed up to court in a neck brace, limping dramatically like she'd survived a car wreck instead of her own stupidity. But what she didn't know was that my porch camera had caught everything, from her marching onto our lawn yelling, to that kick she threw at my pregnant wife. It was all there in high definition. When the video played in court, the silence was delicious. Even her lawyer looked like he wanted to crawl under the desk. The prosecutor tore her story apart. It didn't take long before the judge listed the charges she'd face instead. Aggravated assault on a pregnant woman, trespassing, falsifying a police report, harassment, disorderly conduct, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Her fake tears dried up in seconds. She tried screaming, claiming she was provoked, but the judge wasn't buying it. The gavel dropped. 15 years in prison and $150,000 restitution. The neighborhood finally breathed again. That night, my wife smiled at me, hand resting gently on her belly. Told you karma has good timing, she whispered. We finally felt safe again, our home hours once more. The baby shower had been rescheduled, and the neighborhood came together without fear. Our backyard felt alive with laughter again, the air filled with music, warmth, and relief. For the first time in months, we could relax. I stood on the porch with Mia, holding our newborn Ella in my arms, the golden sunset painting our quiet street in soft light. Everything was calm, finally peaceful. Over the next few weeks, the HOA dissolved out of embarrassment. A new committee was formed, led by Angela, a fair-minded woman in her mid-40s with a friendly approach. Ethan and Mia saw neighbors chatting freely again. Kids riding bikes in the cul-de-sac, laughter echoing where tension had once lingered. The community slowly returned to normal. People smiled again, waved without hesitation. And children played in the streets without fear. Mrs. Dalton's shadow no longer hung over Willow Creek. The lesson was clear. Power can be abused, but truth and evidence ultimately restore balance. Even as the neighborhood healed, I remained vigilant. Standing alone on the porch at dusk, I held a torn piece of letter from Mrs. Dalton, reflecting on everything that had happened. Inside, Mia and Ella rested peacefully, the house warm and quiet. The streetlights flickered faintly, a reminder that while justice had prevailed, vigilance was essential. Willow Creek would never be exactly the same, but we had reclaimed our home, our peace, and our family. And as I looked down the quiet cul-de-sac, I realized that even in paradise, one must always guard what's theirs.